Hey you guys, so today I am not working, but I'm going to get my video done out of the way. The reason I'm not working is because Sally and I had our 5th wedding anniversary last week and she got me a gift of an experience day out. So I'm actually going to go out and spend some time learning how to carve spoons out of wood. I'm really into my kind of survival bushcraft stuff and all that kind of traditional skills and stuff like that. So anyway, with that in mind, I thought we would let's spend a bit of time in romantic chess. So I just played a game with the Caro-Kann Fantasy variation as white, and it was an absolute beauty. I mean, the computer didn't like it at all. It said it was a horrid game and I should have done a lot better. But I thought it was lovely and romantic. So in the spirit of wedding anniversaries, I thought I would share with you 3 really nice Caro-Kann Fantasy variation games that I've played relatively recently. It's a nice opening. I don't know how sound it is. So here I've got open the Explorer, looking at master games. So what is the fantasy variation? Well, if you don't know it, so the Caro-Kann, the idea of the Caro-Kann is that black plays c6, and in order to follow up with d5. Okay. Now this is a sensible approach. He wants to be able to play d5, or he wants to compete for the centre. Okay. So he's inviting white now to play d4 so that he can play this move. Right? And now we have tension in the middle of the board. So you can have an exchange, in which case c will recapture. And then black ends up with 2 central pawns and white ends up with only 1 central pawn. Okay, so this is kind of like a kind of Sicilian, where the idea is that if white wants to go ahead and play d4 straight away, we capture with a wing pawn, and then we end up here with 3 pawns, but then it can be recaptured. I mean, more often than not, you'll have like an open Sicilian where you might have this played now, and here again black ends up with 2 central pawns to white's 1 central pawn. White's compensation is that he's got a piece that's knight right in the center of the board. Okay, but the Caro-Kann Fantasy, so this is your basic Caro-Kann, right? And you could have an exchange, or you could have an advanced variation. But here you see that the most common move, just slightly played by the masters, is knight c3. Right? Followed not too far behind by the advanced variation with e5. Okay. Then you've got the exchange variation, e takes d5, and always c takes d5. I mean, obviously, you want to put a pawn in the middle of the board, right? Anything else simply doesn't make sense. And then you've got knight d2, right? In at 5, was it? In at 4. But at 5, we have the move that I kind of like, which is f3. It's only been played 2,500 times at the master level, whereas the more popular moves have been played 80 to 90,000 times between them. Okay, so this is not a fashionable move. How does it work out for white? Let's see. f3, 44% win rate. Okay, so it's actually the most successful response by white at the master level. Okay, so f3. So what's the idea with f3? Well, it's exactly the same thing. You're saying to black, I see the tension in the middle of the board, but if you want to take, I'm going to recapture with my wing pawn, right? But the difference here is that this is the f pawn. This is Ben Feingold's forget about it pawn, okay? And look, danger line, right? Now, on the plus side, this pawn hasn't moved, okay? So the queen can't be diving out, giving checks and causing trouble, right? Now, if this pawn had moved, the queen could come out here. So let's say takes here, or something like that. And if white does something ridiculous like knight c3 has been played before, okay? Okay, well, let's do something even more ridiculous like knight a3, okay? The thing about knight c3 is it does defend this pawn, but with something like that, obviously it's never been played, you've got a check and a fork on here. So you've got to be very, very careful about losing Freddie that earlier on in the game. But if you know what you're doing and you prepare for it, it works. And very often the move that you want to play is knight f3, defending this square, preventing that dastardly black queen from coming down and causing trouble. So, I don't know this terribly well. I want to know it better, but so let me show you. Let me just switch to my games as white. Okay, so in my games as white, you can see I've got a pretty good hit rate. The move I like least here appears to be e5, but still I have a 49% success with that. f3, hang on, no, that's not right. Okay, there we go, sorry. Sometimes it glitches a bit, you have to move backwards and forwards. Okay, but I've got a pretty good result. Okay, if d takes is the most common, and then I recapture with the f-pawn, 57%. We've got knight f6, 58%. We've got e6, making this little kind of London style, or London style pyramid, which is a bit slow and boring, with 73% win rate for me. So it's working out all right. Okay, Queen b6 has been played twice, and I've got one loss and one draw with that particular line. So that's something I need to look into a little bit more. Anyway, so let's dive into the games. Let me show you these three wonderful games. And we're going to start with a game I just played today because I think it's an absolute stonker. All right, so e4, now c6, d4, and d5, the Caro-Kann. f3, the fantasy variation. And here we exchange in the middle, okay? So now look, white has the upper hand, okay? Having two central pawns to black's one central pawn. However, white does have a bit of a weakness here, as in there's a lot of fresh air around this king, okay? So you've got to do something about that pretty quickly. Now, if you are a Vienna gambit player, and you're kind of used to having a semi-open f-file, okay, then this might be of interest to you. So we have knight f6, attacking this undefended pawn, knight c3 to defend it. Right? Opposite knights, makes perfect sense. Bishop now comes out to attack my queen. And the issue here is that my queen is the only defender of the d4 pawn. So I block with my bishop, bishop e2. And we have an exchange of bishops. Now I can't really recapture with my queen because my queen is busy defending that pawn. So I recapture with the knight. The other plus of this is that comes with development, and I'm also ready to castle short if I want to. Now we have e6, and I castle short, okay? Putting this rook straight onto the semi-open f-file. So very often, if you've lost your d-pawn, then castling queenside can put a rook straight onto a semi-open or open file, which can be very attacking, right? For example, if the d-file's open and you swap queens and force your opponent's king to move, then castling here, putting a rook on there, can come with check as well. Can be really cool. All right, but I'm liking white right now. Okay, look, I'm castled, right? I've got two pieces out on the board, and I've got the central pawn control. What's not to like? Black has got one piece out on the board, ain't castled, and his control of the centre is kind of flimsy and weak. Okay, so now bishop b4. Bishop comes out attacking this knight. Again, I see this a lot. We have this situation a lot in the Vienna Gambit where you've, maybe captured towards the centre. And I'm quite comfortable with this situation. If bishop wants to take, I can recapture with a knight. But I've also moved my knight to this square instead of this square. So my knight could even recapture. So I'm not too worried. So let's get some threats of my own going on. Bishop g5, pinning this knight to the queen. I'm also looking at that knight with a rook now. So the bishop now retreats. So black's wasted a move, bringing that bishop out and then having to retreat it. Okay, and we swap off. Because I can now play e5 and cause the bishop to move one more time. Okay, now bishop retreats yet again. And now look at, again, black's development is nowhere. Got one piece on the board, I'm castled, two pieces out on the board, and I've solidified my control. Notice there's only one bish left on the board, yeah? So what I'm thinking now is, I'm going to get all my bits, all my little guys, come on little guys, everyone get on a dark coloured square, right? Let's play a game of two colour twister. Everyone get on a dark colour square and make life horrible for this guy. Right, so now, I like this move. I thought about a few different ones. I thought, I'm thinking, how do I get my knights into more attacking positions? Right here, they're just too far from the king, or too far from where the king might castle, okay? They're not much use there. So, bringing this knight up, and that's also going to free up this square, so I can play c3 and construct an impenetrable wall of thorns against that bishop. Also notice as well that we have deadlocked pawns on the e-file here, and most of black's material is on the wrong side, okay? So, now he brings out his knight to a6 because he can't bring it here or here. Hang on. No, his knight started there. He can't bring it to c6, and this would just be in the way of his queen if he stuck it there. And he's got no prospects from that square. Right, but now the knight's on a light coloured square, so where can it go? It can only go to dark squares. So c3 suits me just fine and dandy. I'm controlling all of these squares with pawns, right? Now this bishop can't go there even, right? He's only got 2 squares he can really go to. This knight is useless. So, happy days. Black castles. And now I start to bring in my other knight. Remember, we're in the middle game. So what do you do in the middle game? You improve your pieces. Knights, short-range fighters, can be very deadly in tight situations, right? But they're pointless if they're a million miles away from the opponent's king. So, now my opponent does another one of the major middle game things, which is a pawn break. He's trying to mess up this. He sees the power of the dark force here, right? All these dark squares completely covered. And now, decision time. What do you do? Now, a lot of people in the comments say, I get into the middle game and I'm kind of stuck to know what to do. And one of the absolute key things in chess is the timing of when to know when to attack. Knowing when to attack is probably a simpler way of saying that, right? Knowing when to attack. And you should attack when you've got your pieces are lined up, right? So you've got enough pieces involved, and generally 2 pieces is not normally enough. You normally want 3 or more pieces involved in an attack, okay? And you should really just try and calculate whether the attack is going to be decisive. If you just go and prod your opponent, right, with a blunt stick, then what's the point in using your time to do that if your opponent just goes back and goes get off and escapes, right? Or improves his position, right? Or counterattacks you and kills you while you're poking him on the wrong side with a stick. Okay, so now I bring my queen out to g4 because I have an idea, okay? Idea number 1, knight to here, threatening that, queen takes that, checkmate, okay? Now, my opponent's 1500 rated, okay? Just over 1500 at the time of this game. Now, he's going to figure that out, yeah? But, look, it's only chess, right? He's going to figure it out, but he's going to have to do something about it. So, think it through. If my knight comes here, right, how does he stop checkmate there? Right, there's only really a couple of things he can do. He can push g6, or he can put his bishop there and lose his bishop. Okay, so what would you do? Okay, so what he does here now is he captures on d4. Now, so he's trying to break open my control of the center, which I get. That's absolutely fine. Okay, so what I do is I have to say, all right, now, if I just push forward with my attack, can I get a winning combination together before my opponent can break through and capture, checkmate me, right? So that's absolutely critical decision. So many times we launch an attack, but the attack hasn't got enough teeth and is just easily brushed aside. And what you do is you bust open your own position, you sacrifice material or whatever, and you end up getting bitten back. Now, I'm not concerned about this because I know that, let's say, even if he wants to take that pawn and take a rook, right? I'm unconcerned. My king's pretty safe. So I go ahead with this move because I know it's forcing. He hasn't got time to do this. If he does that, it's checkmate, right? So forcing moves buy you time, really, really important. G6 is forced, practically forced. Okay, now what's the next move? Obviously this knight's under attack, but the pawn is pinned, so it isn't actually on prise, okay? Now I could move either of my knights into this square with check, right? And the pawn is also guarding that square, right? So I move my knight from E into F6 with check. And one of the things I like about this, obviously it's defended by its brother anyway, but also look, it's a discovered defense, there's a discovered attack by the queen on black's pawn there, right? But black isn't concerned about that right now because he's in check. Forcing move, he's got to do something. Bishop takes, doesn't matter, knight takes, okay? King's in check, has to move, there's only 2 legal moves. Well, queen takes knight is a third, okay? So, king moves to there. Now, what do you play as white? And this is something that I am really trying to work on at the moment, which is to push ahead and to execute, with a stress on the execute. Ha ha ha. You know? Decapitating my opponent where it's possible. So, my first move, we're looking for forcing moves, queen h4, right? What's the threat? Queen takes h7, checkmate, okay? So this is forced. There is no other option, right? And if you can play chess with a sequence of moves that makes your opponent do stuff he don't want to do, then happy days, you can force him to weaken his position. And obviously this is really poor, right? So I've got ideas here, okay? You know, I could, for example, take that with the knight, with things about pawn check, but what's going to happen there? Boom, queen takes queen, right? Now my next move is winning. What is my next move? And please pause the video and figure it out for yourself, because I was really proud of this, because this is definitely a weakness in my game, is spotting these checkmate patterns, these winning patterns, okay? The move I play now is queen f4. Queen f4. I'm not bothered about this pawn. It's no threat whatsoever because I have a huge threat, okay? My threat is queen to h6, and that is actually checkmate because my queen's guarding these squares and my knight is guarding that one, okay? So what can black do? Nothing at all. Moves the rook, checkmate, okay? So there you go. There's a lovely, lovely, romantic attacking game in the Caro-Kann. Let's move on to the next one. So this is a few weeks ago and I'm down at the low 1400s and we have e4, e6, and the Caro-Kann Fantasy variation. And my opponent here plays e6, which I don't think is terribly impressive. One problem is it's blocking in this bishop and it's just very, very quiet. You'd be tempted here, I think, to push e5 as well and take this square away from that knight, because that knight really wants to come to that square. I mean, he's not even got like a reverse London setup because his bishop's still stuck in. So now I bring my bishop out to e3. He brings his bishop out with check. Obviously c3 comes with tempo, kick the bishop away, off you go bish. b4, go on, no, out of here, I say. And the bishop retreats again. So again we've managed to get space. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns off the line. 3 of them on the 4th rank, controlling the squares in my opponent's side of the board. Right? That's not to be sniffed at. Now I play a4 and tighten the noose. a6, e5 now. Okay, does take this square away from the knight and is shutting off the oxygen supply for that bishop. Right? This bishop's horrible. This bishop's horrible. This knight is horrible. This rook's not out yet. This knight's in a horrible situation. Right? Romantic chess. Out comes the knight to e7. It's not ideal, but it's not too bad. Bishop d3, castles, queen c2. Right? Again, this isn't rocket science, guys. I'm just looking at bishop here with check. So there's no time to push the g-pawn and trap the bishop because he's in check. King has to move here. Bishop retreats. and we've just eliminated black carry. Sorted. So g6 is forced, right? This is how I want you to think. g6 is forced. Bishop into h6. Knight out. Okay, I don't even grab the rook straight away. I grab the knight, e takes, then I grab the rook and queen takes. Okay, this gets fun. Okay, so now I develop my knight. It can't come to its natural f3, so my knight's aiming to come in here. Maybe get the queen across somehow to like here with ideas of this, right? Force him to move his h-pawn. Okay, queen comes out, queen to f2 indeed. Bishop comes out, push f4. Okay, and now we've really got this situation where I'm building this like dark squared barricade. Okay, but what you also have to notice is white's got a bunch of pawns on light squares. Okay, and then look at the material that we've got. I've got no bishops left, and we are in a deadlock situation. I mean, this bishop can't move, so it's basically a pawn, right? Yeah, got deadlock pawns. Other pawns could deadlock themselves soon, and that makes life horrible for bishops. Whereas my knight can slip through, can dance its way through. So in he comes, g5, attacking the bit. Now, I don't want to capture that bishop, because look, that bishop is inert. It's got its feet stuck in concrete. Now we have another deadlock situation here. What do I play? I actually capture. C captures. h4. I haven't even bothered to castle here. h5, right? Because obviously, if I get in here, it's going to mess things up. Okay, h5 is played. Now I castle. Knight moves, knight moves, knight moves. Swap off. Okay. So we're in a situation now where I'm up the exchange. We have quite a lot of deadlock on the board. Quite a lot, indeed. Very few pawns that can actually move here. This is a possible break for me. That's a possible idea for him at some point. Now I push my queen up to f3. Okay, you have to ask yourself, why did my opponent make that move? a5, and I grabbed the rook, which he missed. He's a 1400 player, hung his rook, and actually resigns. Okay, but again, lots of fun. I just like this idea of really cramping your opponent and blocking his space. Now the next game is really quite lovely as well. Again, so this is a few weeks ago, we're both down under 1450. Fantasy variation. Knight here, okay. Now this is a 10-minute rapid game, okay. And obviously e5. e5 comes with tempo. This is the style that we're playing in, right? Romantic, attacking, that's what it's all about. Now c3, and again, we've got a badass barrier in the middle of the board. And this knight is just doing the blooming Grand National. I don't know what it's doing, jumping around all over the board. Anyway, so I bring my bishop out to d3, and we have e6. So again, a kind of a deadlock situation, which is not very preferable for bishops. However, it's a lot less preferable for black's bishops. Right, this guy has got no prospects. This guy can move down this diagonal, but he can't go there or there or there or there. So again, this guy's only got one square to go to. And they're stuck. They're on the wrong side of the barrier, right? And notice that this blockade in the middle of the board is just in black's territory. Okay, this little Tetris piece is on black's side of the board, which is squeezing the space and the air away from black. This bishop, however, is an absolute beauty. Okay, so's this bishop, right? They've got loads of space, loads of options, big diagonals. And that's all come from the opening. Again, knight to e2, because of course we've played f3, so the knight's natural square isn't there. But this pawn could be very nice at some point, you know, castle there, and charge up with Freddy, bust things open, cause some trouble. Again, we see queen c2. Okay, again we see g6 played, right? You start to see some patterns here, and when you play a few of these games, the same kind of ideas come up again and again. And here, of course, I've blundered. Right? With this move, queen c2, look, there's a light squared pawn chain, and there's only one move required to seal it off, And what's going to happen to Bishy Bish? Oh no, my bishop. However, I figure, you know, coming like a wrecking ball, let's make a mess if we can. Okay, so pawn takes. Now, where's this king going to go, right? Suddenly the king side's looking like, but I am down in material, and that is a very, very fun theme in this game. Right, knight g3, protected square, could be useful in defense, we shall see. Knight c6, queen f2, maybe we're thinking about something like this, you know, but there's a lot of protection on that square, so I'm not sure quite what I was thinking here. Now the queen comes in, and now h3 is forced, right? Because otherwise, boom, doesn't matter how much material you've got around there if it's all tripping over each other, right? Playing a game of Twister. Queen takes h2 would be mate, we can't have that, so h3. Bishop moves. Black now castles long. So now I start to attack on the side where the king has gone. I want to open things up here. I want to get my rook involved. I want to try and get my bishop involved, my remaining bishop, seeing as I blew the other one and wasted it. Okay, so now we start taking some pawns. Knight takes. And what do? In fact, that was completely blunder. Yeah, did you spot that? I clearly didn't spot it in the game. And black didn't seem to spot it for a little while either, but eventually he twigs and captures my bishop. Now he's got 4 minutes left on the clock. I've got 8 minutes left on the clock, because my style here, my approach to the game, is to blunder material until my opponent runs out of time. Not recommended. Okay, so now I decide, now I'm down to 2 bishops, I might as well trade off material. Right? Someone hasn't been paying attention. But on the plus side, we've opened things up. Okay, here, this knight is on a really nice outpost. It's defended by a pawn. It can't be harassed by my pawns. Okay, so you know, yeah. I mean, there's a general rule that when you're behind in material, you don't want to trade off. But my opponent's stuff is all kind of over here, right? This knight is maybe a thorn in my side. So I eliminate the knight, move my king here for some reason. Knight comes in now to attack, and now rook b1, and queen takes knight, basically forcing a trade of queens, right? Comes with check, also attacking my queen. What can I do? Have to take. Okay, so now we're in a situation where my king is out in the middle of the board, and I'm 2 bishops down, right? My opponent's got just under 4 minutes left on the clock. This ought to be a walk in the park for black, but check out how it goes, right? We're on move 22. We're not even halfway through the game. It starts throwing pawns at me. Right? He's got 6 pawns, I've got 7, right? So that is my only compensation for being 2 bishops behind and blundering 2 bishops. Starts to squeeze up with his pawns. Double up my rooks, no problem. A4. Okay, so obviously the threat here is if he takes, I can come in here, but then the king can simply move away. Yeah, so this is kind of desperate times, right? Now he moves his rook up to d5 for reasons known only to him. I move up my king for reasons known only to me, and he moves his bishop. I shuffle pawns up. Okay. Let's just play it through. I take, he takes. Yeah, now I would, even with 2 minutes on the clock, I think I would take black any day of the week here, right? And okay, this is interesting. Okay, so this is the human shield tactic, right? Instead of clearly I don't want to recapture, right? Because he gets rook takes, and my king is in a whole heap of trouble with this other rook being able to come in. This bishop, oh no, we don't want that. But g4 here, and now my king can sit there quite happily, right, all day long, right? The bishop can't take that pawn, the rook can't take that pawn because it's black's own pawn. You can't take your own pieces in chess. So I'm using this pawn as a hostage, right? One false move, right? That pawn is guarding my king now. All right, bishop retreats, now attacking this loose pawn on a5. Double up my rooks. protects, rook here, at least defends this pawn. I mean, all I can hope now is with 1 minute 32 on the clock that my opponent runs out of time. Okay, bishop takes a pawn. Attack the bishop. Bishop moves. Let's get a pawn. Hooray, compensation. Okay. Oh no, my rook's under attack. We have to trade off. My rook can't. There's no sideways motion, and wherever he goes backwards, he's going to get et. So now I'm still 2 bishops down, and my pawn advantage is even gone. So what do? Grab the pawn, quick. There's nothing for it. Run. We have to get a queen. Let's get to the line, okay? b4. Capture the pawn. Recapture. My opponent now has 2 pawns, okay? But 2 bishops and a rook and a king. More than enough material to checkmate me. Go on, Gary. Leg it, Gary. Let's go. Rook f4 now. Seals off the f-file so the king cannot penetrate into the f-file. Go, Gary, go. Oh no, a pawn's rushing for the line. Go on, Gary. Oh no, pawn to c2. Okay, now, my opponent's got 44 seconds left on the clock. Check. Okay, here now, the rook is threatening to grab the c-pawn. And no more Colin. Okay, now here, I'm not sure what I was doing. I've got nearly 6 minutes left on my clock. I could have just grabbed the pawn. I don't know why I didn't, but I decided instead to come here and harass this bishop. But clearly I can't capture that bishop because the pawn will just promote. So I don't quite know what I'm doing, but it makes my opponent have to think. Here as well, I guess no, he couldn't have even gone there because my pawn would have captured him, right? So this is all pragmatic stuff. Bishop comes here, and now I push my king in. Again, I don't grab the pawn, right? Now, rook b1 makes no sense. My opponent from the Netherlands is down to 25 seconds. Attack the rook. Okay, I'll take the pawn. He takes my pawn. Check. Block. Right, now this is just gorgeous. Takes. Right, now my opponent is down to 14 seconds on the clock. Now, it is possible to checkmate your opponent's king with 2 bishops and a king. But it's very, very, very hard. Okay, and now g7, and black has no way of stopping this pawn. Just no way. Bishop could come here, doesn't matter, pawn promotes, right? Bishop can't come there because his own pawn's in the way. King can't get there in time because it promotes. And with 5 minutes left on the clock, I am going to sweep up the game. And here, my opponent, I guess, runs out of time with only 4 seconds left on the clock. So, I mean, clearly, that first game, beauty. I loved it. Wonderful. You know, great attacking stuff. This one, skin of your teeth. I blundered both bishops, right? And yet still managed to get a result. And with 5.5 minutes left on the clock. But maybe there's a clue in that. Maybe the fact that I end up with 5.5 minutes left in a 10-minute game. I think it's a 10-minute game. Yes, right? I think that's a clue as to why I lost the material. But hey, it's a romantic, beautiful opening. Plus, I think that, you know, if you follow my channel, if you like the Vienna, maybe this has some similarities, right? With moving the f-pawn, and if we get an exchange situation, which we didn't in this case, but if we get an exchange situation, you know, this is kind of familiar territory, right? Bishop out here, right? You could have knight here, you could have knight getting pinned, maybe captured, b retakes, you know. This pawn structure is very familiar to Vienna Gambit players. Knight out here, short castle, rook on the semi-open f-file. It all kind of feels a bit similar if you play the Vienna Gambit. So you'll find patterns and ideas that you can recycle and reuse from one opening to the other. Just a thought. Okay, so that's it. Wanted to do that with you. I'm going to get on with the rest of my romantic day. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. See you soon.